with some quick introductions and whatever I can remember without having the slide in the back. I'm Ajay, co-founder of Monk Labs. We're a vertical SaaS company focused on the real estate industry. We've been building in this industry for about 4 years. Prior to starting this, I had started a marketplace business in the real estate industry itself. For those of you who might be aware of, let's say, Nestaway or Zolo Stays or any of those companies, like kind of very similar in scope to what they were doing. We started that company in 2014, built that for about 5 years, eventually sold that company in 2019. During that stint of about 5 years, we understood the real estate industry really, really well. And then we thought, why don't we build SaaS for this industry? And that's essentially how we got into vertical SaaS. At the time when we had actually started, vertical SaaS was not really very well known within the Indian context. It was a lot better known in the US. Okay, we have this going. It was a lot better known in the Valley. We didn't even know that we were building vertical SaaS till we started raising money when some VC called us a vertical SaaS company, and that's kind of how even we got exposed to that term. Okay. Oh, okay, all right, you can go to the next slide. So let me give you super quick context about our company and our business, and everything else that follows, you can put that in context with this. We've been in business for about 4 years now. Very recently, we touched 1 million in ARR as a business. Vertical SaaS for real estate, about 10 million square feet of real estate is managed using our software and our platforms. This is in about 10 different countries. About 5,000 business users use our software on a daily basis. And we have a little over 100 active client accounts at this point. So one of my favorite quotes in SaaS is by the CEO of Netscape from the 90s, like Jim Barksdale. He says there's only 2 ways to make money in business. One is to bundle and one is to unbundle. And the reason why I remember this quote very, very well is because in the context of the software ecosystem, the unbundled ecosystem is really where horizontal SaaS plays, where you pick a very niche solution and then you kind of like sell that to multiple different customers and you allow them to stack multiple solutions on top of each other. That's the unbundled ecosystem. Whereas in vertical SaaS, what we always see is more of a bundled solution, where you try to build multiple products for one industry. You pick the industry that you really want, and then you start building a lot of different solutions catering to that particular industry's specific requirements, which is really what we look at as vertical SaaS. Now, let's talk about why there is a need for vertical SaaS in the first place. A lot of people here are probably selling SaaS once again to the tech industry, right, to other SaaS companies, etc. So when you're doing something like that, it's pretty easy because your customers understand tech and they understand SaaS stacking and they understand all of these things. But when you move outside of the tech industry, people don't understand these things really well. People don't want to buy 10 different softwares and figure out how to integrate all of them with each other. They don't understand how to use Zapier to make one system talk to the other. They don't employ engineers themselves, who can kind of do all of these things for them. What real world businesses really want is a solution that is built for their company, that is built for their business by a company who is committing to building in that industry in the future. They do not want complexity. They want something that is really simple that they can use, which is really why vertical SaaS companies remain in business. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of different lessons in no particular order that we've learned building vertical SaaS companies, right? I think the first very key thing that I realized when we were actually trying to raise money and when I was doing some research was that vertical SaaS is actually growing very, very fast. Most SaaS companies are building in horizontal markets, but actually vertical SaaS companies are doing exceptionally well. Companies like Viva, companies like Procore, companies like, even in India, like companies like Zenoti, reached a unicorn status very recently, but there are multiple $10 billion, $50 billion companies building for vertical markets in the US. Vertical SaaS is huge. It's grown almost 1,000% in the decade from 2010 to 2020. And the number is very quickly increasing as we go forward as well. So vertical markets are growing really quick. A very important lesson that we learned is that when you're building for the vertical market, you're not really going to be building a point solution, right? You're going to actually end up building a lot of product capability because you have picked one customer. Now, let's say that how you build in vertical markets is that maybe you pick, let's say, car dealerships, right, as your ideal customer, and you start building software for car dealerships. That's really how you do vertical SaaS, right? The car dealership will only choose you over, let's say, choosing a Zoho CRM if you have all the capabilities of Zoho CRM, but built for the car dealership industry. That's really why they're going to choose you, right? Over going with a horizontal CRM or a horizontal SaaS solution. So to ensure that you can win the customer, you always have to keep building a lot of product capability. So when you look at Viva Systems, or if you're looking at Zenotti, or if you're looking at Toast or any of these companies, the amount of capability that they bring to their customers is very huge. They'll have CRM systems, they'll have billing automation systems, they'll have operations management systems. So they end up building a lot of product with respect to capability, and that becomes something to remember by. Okay, so let's talk a little about like how you actually get started. So let's say somebody here wants to start a vertical SaaS business. They always say start with a niche, even in horizontal SaaS business, right? Now, if you're going to do vertical SaaS, that advice very much remains. Just that you should pick a micro niche within your vertical and start by building for that. Now, let's say that we take the same example as before. Let's say you want to start a SaaS company focused on car dealerships. You would probably not start by building for the entire car dealerships industry. Maybe you start only for building maybe dealerships who are selling electric vehicles, for example, right? And then you start with that, and then you start expanding your customer segments from there, and then you can keep growing from there. But it's very important to pick a micro niche within your vertical. When we started our business, our first set of customers were these companies that were called co-living companies. So they're essentially like flat sharing management companies, right? So we started with that niche because none of the incumbents were looking at that market. And the customers there were really underserved. So we ended up building some solution for them. They really liked our solution. They started referring us to many other companies in that industry, and we started growing from there. So starting with a micro niche within your vertical is a really good place to start. With respect to go-to-market strategies, I think there's really just two ways you can do it, right? Like you either try doing a PLG approach and go very bottoms up, or you do an enterprise approach and you go top down. Our experience in vertical SaaS has been that it's much better to do the top-down approach. We've tried the bottom-up approach as well. It's not really a bad way to do it, but doing a top-down approach, we find it to be a lot more effective. So what do we mean by top-down approach? When you pick a market can be a city, it can be a state, it can be a country, it can be a region, like whatever you're defining as a market, try to find who are the top 10 customers in that market. Now figure out how you can go and have conversations with all 10, like management teams and senior leadership. Amongst those 10, there will definitely be more than half of them will be using your competitor software. There itself is a really good opportunity because many of them will not be happy with your competitor softwares. The remaining half will definitely be using some system or the other, but they're more likely to be on, let's say, a Salesforce or an SAP. And you can see if you can build a solution that stacks on top of their existing systems. But the reason why we kind of feel that this is a really good thing to do is because vertical markets are very niche, the industry is really small, and the industry keeps talking to each other. The best way to convince anyone outside of the top 10 to sign up with your offering is to tell that multiple players in the top 10 are your customers. Now, one example I can give here is that in the Singapore rental housing market, amongst the top 10 players, 4 of them are already our customers. And that was because the number 1 customer signed up with us in 2019 at the time we launched itself. And then the number 2, number 3, like very quickly signed on because the number 1 player was with us. And now that entire market is with us. Right? Any new company that gets started, automatically they come with us because all of the market leaders are using our system. Now we are trying to scale into new geographies, and this is now starting to become our playbook because we've experimented with bottoms-up strategies as well. Not that it doesn't work, but for example, we are trying to enter into GCC right now, more specifically into UAE. And all I've been doing for the last 12 months is going and talking to Emaar and Damac, which are the really big companies over there, trying to convince them to move away from their existing system and come over to us, because even though it's going to take a lot longer to sign these customers, once you have one of the top 2, 3 with you, getting the rest of them to follow suit is going to be much easier. So that's been one of our experiences. If you're focusing on, let's say, a more bottom-up approach, right? Like, let's say if you're trying to do, maybe not really PLG, but let's say even if you want to drive some kind of growth by running ad campaigns, our experience has been that the CACs through marketing are relatively low compared to horizontal SaaS. This is probably because the competition is not as intense. We've seen some ad campaigns being run for, let's say, a horizontal CRM, for example. the CACs are really high, and it takes a long time to get that money back. When you're actually targeting vertical ad, which is very specific to one particular industry, and once again, because your problem solution definition is most likely to be very precise, given that you're building only for one industry, the click-through rates and the conversions are so much better in vertical SaaS versus horizontal SaaS, right? So what we have seen is that the CAC from an ad marketing perspective, it's a lot more efficient. For us at the moment, it's somewhere about 5 months is our CAC payback. If we really optimize, we think it'll come down to about 3 to 4 months. This is not loaded CAC. It doesn't include salaries of my team. This is just the amount that we're giving Google and Facebook for driving some of these. So it's reasonably efficient. Like I've seen in horizontal SaaS, it becomes like 6 to 12 months just in CAC payback. Once you look at loaded CAC, it becomes like 12 months plus, which becomes really difficult to recuperate from your customers. Counterintuitively, sales cycles we have noticed are a lot longer in vertical SaaS businesses. We were told initially that, hey, your vertical SaaS business, you have like a product meant only for one customer, assuming you've built your brand correctly and generated leads correctly, your customers should close a lot faster because you've built only for that one industry, right? That has been something that has been proven otherwise, at least from our experience, because it is anyway taking us anywhere from 3 to 6 months to close even an SMB client. Mid-market is surprisingly at the same level, 3 to 6 months. Enterprise deals take a lot longer for us to put together. We realize this is because of the amount of capability that we have. There is no single decision maker who decides to come onto our system. We typically need a buy-in from someone from the sales team, someone from the operations team, possibly somebody from management as well. So multiple people within the company need to give a buy-in before the client opts for our system. So even a normal SMB deal, so for us an SMB deal is between 5K to 10K USD per year. Even that ends up taking about like 3.5 months. Whereas a mid-market deal for us is between 10K to about 100K. And the mid-market deal also takes us about like 4 months-ish. So we kind of like are starting to focus a lot more on mid-market deals because the sales cycle is kind of the same anyway. A great thing about being in vertical SaaS is that upsells are extremely efficient. If you're able to nail a land and expand kind of a strategy, it's going to be super easy for you to kind of like keep working your way into the customer. It's very obvious why upsells are efficient. Customer really very high level of homogeneity between all of your customers. So any feature that you build, it is very likely that it's going to get adoption from almost all of your customers. So for context, we package our products into 4 different modules. And we try to sell only the first one, which is core, which is one of our modules. We try to sell, we land the customer with that. Today, almost 80% of our customers use all 4 modules, right? So the upsell is extremely efficient. A lot of them opt for multiple modules even at the time of sign up, but even if not, we don't really mind too much anymore. Like earlier, we used to try selling all of the products bundled together. Like now we've started unbundling and selling them differently, selling them separately. But the upsells are very, very efficient. Almost all customers that we manage to land with even one of our 4 modules, we know that eventually they're going to take at least 1 or 2 more of our modules. So it kind of helps in that upsell efficiency. Retention rates are understandably very high as well. All customers, once again, there's homogeneity at the customer level. And more than that, they understand that you are building only for that market. So they know that you're going to be very disciplined as you keep building. And vertical SaaS has a lot lesser in competition compared to horizontal SaaS, right? Like, so there are like very few people, and there are reasons for that as well, but very few companies are building for vertical markets. So even if you don't deliver everything according to plan, it's not like the customer has 25 other options that they can choose, to replace you with. As a consequence of that, but really more to do with the fact that, if you're doing a good job building and servicing your customers, retention rates are very, very high. We've had a lot of avoidable customer churn, where we made mistakes, but for those customers where we feel we have done a pretty good job, we have relationships with customers like 3 years plus, 4 years plus, and counting. And we're not even talking enterprise segment, right? I'm talking SMB customers that we have relationships with for 2.5, 3.5, 4 years. So it's really, the lifetime value per contract is pretty high. Something that we've noticed is that event marketing actually works really well in vertical SaaS. Any market you're selling into, once again, city, country, region, doesn't really matter. Try to find what is an event that the entire industry attends. Even if it is a little expensive, like I would definitely encourage people to go there and be a part of that event. Either as a sponsor, like definitely you should be participating as an audience in any industry event. But if you can sponsor, if you can find the budget to put up a stall and meet customers, it's very, very effective. And when I say effective, we were earlier told that event marketing is something you should do a little later in the journey, and it's really comes more out of a brand marketing budget and not really from a demand generation budget. From what we have seen, we actually have gotten active, good customers that we met and generated the lead at events. Maybe it might not pay back 100% of your event marketing cost, so you might have to like figure out how you're going to do that, but it is actually paying, it's bringing back revenue as well. So it's not just a brand development activity doing events, like you can actually generate demand and convert them to customers as well. So event marketing is super effective. So talking just a little bit about how you should think about your team building, especially if you're doing vertical SaaS. In vertical SaaS, your team needs to understand your market really, really well. And that remains one of our biggest challenges even today. Me and my co-founder and my leadership team, we really like the real estate industry. So every time, we see a new article, like we're happy to read it, go through it, and just understand what's happening in the industry at large. The rest of our team doesn't share the same enthusiasm for real estate, right? So it's really important because we try to portray ourselves as a real estate company that is doing software. And that's how we want to create our brand for customers, so that like it creates a lot of relatability for them and why they should work with us. And that's really what we keep selling, that, hey, don't go to Salesforce, don't go to Zoho, because these guys are building for the world. We're only building for the real estate industry, and that's why you should come work with us, right? Now, we can do that digitally quite easily, but then to get my team as excited about rental yields as, like what my customers are, it's a really difficult thing for us to do. We try to do it nonetheless, like once a month we organize, has to think through, because this is a very, very real constraint. I've seen a lot of vertical SaaS founders like starting, and then they get early customers, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue, but then like somewhere between the 1 million and 5 million range, I've seen quite a lot of companies being built out of India stagnating, right? Nothing wrong in that if you want to build a lifestyle business, but if you really want to go raise venture money and try to build a really huge company, you need to think through TAM quite a bit. If you do the TAM math really well, and there's a lot of different ways you can do TAM, and you can I've been in VC meetings where I've asked them what TAM is justifiable for you to invest, and then I'll show the TAM in the same way, right? I can do anything in Excel to show a huge TAM. But if you really do the math correctly, a lot of vertical markets, they end up having a TAM less than $1 billion. 100 million to $1 billion is like a lot of companies, a lot of markets I've seen, like it's in that range. That might not really justify like a venture scale return, and like it'll be very difficult to justify some of the larger VCs to write a check. So TAM is definitely a constraint. Now, how you can try to answer the TAM question if you are in vertical SaaS, one of the first things that we try to do is to measure wallet share of our customers. Now, what I really mean by wallet share is that how much is my customer spending on SaaS and how much of that is coming to me, right? Because in vertical SaaS, we're building quite a lot of product. So how much of their total SaaS spend comes to us? So now that is something that we started measuring. Like we took a leaf out of like a lot of B2C consumer applications playbook just to see what is wallet share, and we started applying that concept in B2B SaaS as well. In vertical SaaS, quite a lot of my own customers, more than 75% of their entire SaaS spend comes to me, right? And there's scope for me to increase it even more. And that becomes a really, really important point because the upsells are very efficient, because the customer brand loyalty keeps increasing, because it's all within a vertical market. You can really, really drive up how much money you can make per customer. So that kind of makes your CAC payback and LTV math, like it makes all of these things really, really work in your favor. So you always need to be like cognizant of how much money you're pulling out of your customers. Very similarly, market share is also something to look at. Market share is not something that people think about a lot in horizontal SaaS. I was reading this report the other day. Even Salesforce, which is the largest CRM company, has only about 16-17% market share in the CRM domain. Whereas Viva Systems, which is the largest vertical SaaS company, they build only for the pharmaceutical industry. They have an 80% market share within the pharmaceutical industry. right? Everybody from Pfizer to Merck to everybody uses Viva systems, right? So they have like a crazy, this is only in the US, but they have 80% market share within that industry. And really the reason is what I had mentioned before, which is that everybody wants to buy what the market leader has bought. So if you get like 2, 3 out of the top 10, like then everybody kind of like almost like follows suit, right? So it's very important to keep an eye on market share as well. Something that we've noticed, scaling geographies is relatively easy. A point I should mention here is that we don't sell in the US, right? Like we've tried before, like it's the market dynamics don't really justify us moving to the US so quickly. So we've focused a lot more on Asia and Europe so far. What we've been pleasantly surprised by is how easy it is for us to enter a new market from the perspective of product, right? Of course, go-to-market changes quite drastically, but because it's a vertical market, because the customer needs are very homogeneous, it's very easy to launch into a new market. So we just do like language localization and something around billing systems to integrate with a few payment gateways, but we can really launch in any country that where we feel it is justified that we're present. So scaling geographies is relatively easy in vertical SaaS. Let me talk a little about how you can innovate on revenue model in vertical markets. And it's very important that we kind of figure this out in the vertical SaaS business once again because TAM is a constraint. But some of the best things that happen is that you can do a lot of innovation in how you run the business, right? So you can build consumer marketplaces on top of your SaaS. Now, a very good example of this is this company called MindBody in the US. They have like a SaaS that is used to manage gyms, but then they also have a consumer marketplace on top for people to find gyms and book and pay for their gym subscription as well, right? So the SaaS really becomes a retention thing for them to keep gyms engaged with them, and they really make money from the B2C consumer marketplace that they've built on top. Similarly, payment processing is also a fantastic way to make money. Toast, which is like a restaurant booking management software, at this point, about 75% of their revenue comes from payment processing, and only 25% of their revenue comes from SaaS. So an overwhelming amount of their revenue stream comes from payment processing and not from selling subscription itself. A lot of fintech is getting added on top of vertical SaaS businesses. Very recently, for some of our customers, we helped them in getting financing to do some of their new projects. And we have a whole slew of real estate private equity companies, who are interested to work with us to kind of lend to our customers, right? That's just one example from our industry, but we kind of see that a lot of other vertical SaaS companies have gone down a very similar direction with respect to lending and a lot of services around fintech. You can also do quite a lot of value-added services. For example, some of our competitors in the US, their primary way of making money is selling renters insurance and tenant background verification to landlords through their SaaS. Right? So once again, they've given the SaaS free of cost, and then they really just make the money every time a tenant moves in, the landlord can do a background check through their system. They're once again integrated with third-party companies to help them do that, but a chunk of their revenue stream really comes from there. So the SaaS that they've given is really just, once again, more on the retention side. So there's quite a lot of different ways you can make money through your SaaS in vertical markets, all once again because of the homogeneity of your customers. Maybe like one last point that I'll mention before I wind up. In vertical SaaS, we've noticed that strategic investors show interest and get involved much earlier in the journey, even if VCs are not as keen on that vertical SaaS business. This could be from the perspective of just raising strategic investment, or this could even be from the perspective of selling the company itself. We constantly get a lot of inbound requests from huge, let's say like real estate developers, once again, private equities, like a lot of like strategic players, because to them, they are more interested not in the recurring revenue or growth, but they are really like interested in getting distribution to a certain audience so that they can go and do other things with that same audience. But that homogeneity we've noticed brings quite a lot of inbound strategic investor interest. Like as I said, you can either choose to sell early if you want to pocket some money, or if you want to like raise from a strategic, you can do that as well. But that option opens out quite a bit. Like even once we touched about 100K in ARR, we started getting strategic interest. Like now we're at about $1 million. A lot more is coming our way. And I feel that as we keep going ahead, like a lot more of these opportunities might open out as well. That kind of brings me to whatever I had to share. Like if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Actually, hello. Can you?
Yeah.
So you said in some of your customers, your wallet share is 70%, right? And these are mostly, I'm presuming, SMB customers.
Mid-market as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
So you have a limitation on their spend. Like the budget is, let's say, $100. You have to stick with it. So, and if you are at 70% already, how do you go further, right? So there
Yeah.
is.
So I think that's a really good question. I think pushing from 70% to 100% is not the focus. The focus is I have a lot of customers for whom only 30% of their wallet share is with me. So how to push that up to about, so we know that we can never get to 100%. No SaaS company can. So in our best customer, the things that we have left out, like where we've left money on the table is stuff like they pay for Zoom or Slack or G Suite and things like that. Things we're never going to go after, right? But we've ended up replacing CRM. So like whatever is their CRM budget has come over to us. We're very strong in accounting and payment processing. So we've ended up replacing their accounting and payment budget, like has come on to us as well. We're really strong in, let's say, like operations and ticketing. So the money that would have otherwise gone to Zendesk or Freshdesk has like ended up coming back over to us as well. So there's like quite a lot of these things that we've done. So the thought is not to take from 70% to 100%. The thought really is to make sure that you get to about 50-60% of your customers' wallet share in the first place.
Okay, so that clear. So I had second question also. So we had experience selling to Europe market. So you mentioned you have clients in Europe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So compared to India or Southeast Asian market, the Europe market is very different in terms of the behavior. Like it's for us, it was very difficult to get the initial connect. Like they are very reserved or they are very anti cold mail kind of a thing, right? So how did you crack that market, or at least how did you get that traction in that market going initially? What are the things that you did for Europe market specifically, vis-a-vis
Okay.
India or Southeast Asia?
So Europe, we've not particularly cracked or anything. So just keep that in context. We've just started doing Europe recently. You're very right in saying that like Europe behaves very differently. It doesn't behave either like Asia or US, right? They have the purchasing power of the US, but they don't have the same speed of buying that the US has. What we've noticed is that Europe is also very relationship driven. So I've gone to Europe a couple of times. Like so, there once again, event marketing and offline happens quite a bit. So showing yourself in these events would be a really, really good start. If you've built a product for India and you're trying to sell that product in Europe, might not really be the best thing to do because in Europe, very similar to US, they want to self-serve. They want a great user experience. They don't want to be on a Zoom call with you. Like they want to do the free trial, freemium, and go down that direction. So first evaluate whether the product meets some of these guidelines. They are very particular about GDPR, your data being locally hosted and all of those things, right? So we've invested a reasonable amount of effort in doing some of these things and we've just started doing a Europe GTM, but it is still very difficult. I think you will have to either find great partners in Europe who can possibly resell for you. There are some pros and cons of doing that as well, but I think you physically being there for a few months and doing something there would probably be like a good start.
Hi Ajay, thank you. It was very insightful. I also built a very similar vertical focus SaaS product. The one curious point that I had was with regard to the SaaS-enabled marketplace. How has your customer response been? Is there any sort of an apprehension when you pitch them against each other on top? Like say, you've already sold a similar platform to two competing customers and then you put them on a marketplace. I don't know how much you've ventured into SaaS-enabled marketplace, but based on your experience.
So our experience in SaaS-enabled marketplace is limited to market research. And then we decided not to do it for a different reason, that building traction on the consumer marketplace in real estate will be very expensive. We'll have to go fight like a lot of like property portals and players like that. Right. But when we spoke to our customers, they were all very keen. They really did not have any problem at all. We kind of modeled it as an opt-in, saying, look, if you want to use it, you can use it. If you don't want to use it, you don't need to use it. And that's kind of how we built the prototype for that. We didn't really find, because nobody is going to say no to an extra customer and some more revenue. There were some questions around like how to price it and what the take rate should be and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But as a concept, we did not really face any challenges for that. More recently, I was speaking to this company. They're SaaS for the dental industry. And once again, they've built a consumer marketplace for people to find dentists and book appointments as well. But even they were saying it's not too challenging to convince people to come onto the marketplace. I don't know about their customer acquisition on the consumer side, but I don't think that was very challenging.
So there was not a lot of price discrepancies that you mean to say here.
We never got to the pricing discussion with our customers, but from what intuitively, I don't think that should be very challenging, at least in my industry. But once again, some of these are very industry specific.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, we need to start on the next meeting. I'm sure Ajay is going to be here around.
I'll be here,
So-
like, we can
Yeah.
catch during the breakout.
Yeah. So we'll just call it a day then. Round of applause for Ajay. Thank you so much.